The New Haven Board of Alders will hold a public hearing on the following matter on Tuesday, March 16th at 6 p.m. via video conference. Please click this URL to join: https://bit.ly/3vqctqz, or by phone dial 301-715-8592 or 312-626-6799. The webinar ID is 951-0067-6843. The passcode 848-711-1271. International numbers are available at https://newhavenct.zoom.us/AWUDQFUFI. First item from the Director of Emergency Management, a resolution authorizing the city to submit an application to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, AFG, for $895,455 with a 10% local match to replace a 23-year-old pumper with a new piece of equipment. In addition, the committee will hold a workshop regarding the Emergency Communications Center. This item is on file and available for public inspection in the office of the City Clerk, 200 Orange Street, Room 202, New Haven. Per order, Honorable Gerald M. Antunes, Chair. Attest, Honorable Michael Smart, City Clerk. For accessibility-related requests, please contact 203-946-7833 for voice or 203-946-8582 TTY prior to the meeting. If you wish to present testimony at the meeting, you must register in advance at https://newhavencT.zoom.us/AWUDQFUFI or by calling 203-946-7934 before 2 p.m. on the day of the meeting. Public comment testimony may also be submitted via email to publictestimony@newhavenct.gov before 2 o'clock on the day of the meeting. First, I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and I would like to have my committee members introduce themselves. And I know our vice chair may be late. He's at another meeting, so we'll start with Alder Crespo.
Yes, Alder Crespo, Ward 16 for Haven.
Abby Roth, Ward 7.
I don't see Alder Haywood on. Alder Singh is out of town. Alder Smith.
30.
And I am Gerald Antunes, Ward 12, the chair of the committee. I'd also like to recognize some of our colleagues that are on the call with us: Alder Santana, Alder Edwards, and our third officer, Alder, excuse me, just dropped something. Oh, Alder Saldicola, lost my place. All right, Mickey, and I see our majority leader, Alder Furlow, just popped in as well. Our members from emergency management there.
Do you want to do fire department first?
Yes, let's do the fire department grant first.
Good evening, Alders.
Hey. Austin, how are you?
How are you? Messieurs and Madames, how are you this evening?
We are well. Very good. Who's going to start? All right, we see that we have our deputy CAO is on. Rebecca Bombero, Kyla Wallace, Rick Fontana, and
Need screen sharing capabilities for a brief moment, if possible.
our Assistant Fire Chief, Justin McCarthy. You got it, Chief?
Not yet, sir. If
Screen
Mr.
share for the chief, please.
Lucas or Mickey can make that happen, that would be great. I'll try one more time, hang on. Something's happening. Great. Okay. Thank you. So thank you so much for giving us the opportunity, and thank you for your time this evening. One of the ways that we replace apparatus in the New Haven Fire Department long before I was here, and as I continue in my tenure, is to seek out what we call AFG grants, which are aid to firefighter grants. Many times it's only a 10% match on apparatus. It gives us an opportunity to supplement our capital program of replacing aging apparatus, but it also gives us the ability to enhance our response capabilities. One of the issues that I've been looking at for a little bit is some of our single houses that are in the outlying areas of the city, where they are geographically, what type of response district they have, what types of calls they potentially could respond to. And so we're looking to replace an older piece of apparatus with something that's called a Quint. It really is a fire engine with enhanced capabilities. There are different types and styles. This is an older picture, but the type that I'm looking at would be something like this. This is actually a 99 Quint. They call it a telesquirt. This may or may not be the exact model that we get, but it is a fire engine with enhanced capabilities. So basically, Engine 5 has always had enhanced capabilities. It's had a Quint there before. And the difference between a Quint and a regular engine is that a Quint gives you the ability to apply water from an elevated pipe or tower or elevated aerial device. It also, Engine 5 carries foam. The reason why these are important is Engine 5 at Woodward Station is located at the other end of the city, in the eastern portion of the city, but it also responds down into our tank farms and industrial areas, and it also responds to Tweed Airport along with Engine 16. And so when we looked at the type of apparatus that we want to move towards getting in those particular areas, a Quint came to mind. And so that's what we're putting our application for with the Aid to Firefighter Grant. I'll get into the technical side of it, but I believe Rick Fontana is on, and Kayla that can get into the administrative side of how the grant, particularly the vehicle, if you will, pardon the pun, that the grant application will take.
Chief, could I just ask you while we're waiting to switch over, Engine 5, where is that located now?
That's Woodward Station.
All right. And this piece will replace that one at that station.
It will not replace that pumper at that station. It will replace an older piece, which is in 9A, which is 23 years old. And so what will happen is Engine 5 will become our reserve piece, and we'll be able to place this in their position. And what that does is that lowers the average age of our fleet.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Rick?
Yeah. Good evening, Chair, Alder Antunes, members of the committee. Always nice to sit in front of you to talk about our grants and certainly not putting a burden on taxpayers. But Rick Fontana, Director of Emergency Operations, City of New Haven, 66 Putting Green Lane, Orange, Connecticut. So as the chief said, and yeah, this is certainly a great piece of fire apparatus. It certainly will add to the fleet that New Haven has. And as you know, that the standard for fire apparatus response times, NFPA 1720, is really important on that side of the city, as there is there's not a truck company over there. So this truck company will have the ability to not, as the chief said, not only flow water, but have an aerial device as well. And the good thing is, as when we put in for these grants, we've got to paint the picture for the folks that are looking at this to talk about the importance. And not only will this cover sections of Fairhaven on the other side of each of the bridges, but also the East Shore, and then our infrastructure, which is the Port of New Haven and Tweed Regional Airport. So this is would be a key piece of apparatus. And, you know, again, the numbers are, this is $895,000 piece of apparatus. If approved by the federal government, they will pick up $814,000 of that apparatus. And that leaves us what we call non-federal resource or cost share by the city of New Haven, $81,405. And if we can make that happen, and again, this was all done through a risk analysis. The chief and I had talked a lot about the needs of the city, and the chief talking with his personnel. It replaces an almost 23-year-old piece of apparatus. And if you could take an older piece of apparatus out of service, put a new piece in, it gives so much more capability to the department. And as you go down the road, you may not have to replace another engine because you have another spare engine in place. So it's just, you know, just a cost savings all around. The apparatus that's being replaced, as the chief said, engine 9A, it has 135,000 miles and over 9,100 hours of engine time, which is like, it's a typical pumper that goes for over 20 years in New Haven. This isn't, a suburban area. This is an urban area. These trucks are moving all the time. So I think the important thing is it will help with response times being reduced to that part of the city. It provides that infrastructure protection, which we have to talk about. It's key to them saying, we're going to give you the money because we like your project. And I think we've always done a great job in painting a picture of the city's needs. And again, I think the important thing is when you look at, and the way the federal government, I don't want to get too much into this, but I think it's important for you to understand that the way the federal government looks at this is they look at the population. So we have 130,764 residents. And what they look at is they look at this piece of fire apparatus will last 20 years. So per year, it costs each resident 34 cents per year over a 20-year period. And what the federal government does is they take that away. They bear the cost. So it's a smaller amount of money to FEMA to say, you know what, we like your project. We think the need is there. We're going to award it. And we've done pretty well throughout the years. We come in front of you so many times saying, look, I think this is going to save the taxpayers. Of course, it is federal dollars, and it complements everything that the New Haven Fire Department does on a day-to-day basis. It's protect property and save lives. This will just be another truck that will do that at a small number that the chief will find in the apparatus account. $81,405. It will be one of the nicest trucks in the city.
Great, thank you, Rick.
And that's all I have. Sorry.
Thank you, Rick. Just as a reminder to everyone who is all our guests who are speaking tonight to give your name and address of record so that we get it clear.
John Alston, 952 Grand Avenue. And if I may, I see Kayla and our team on. I want to thank you for your assistance in putting the grant together, the application together.
Do we have any more testimony from you or your partners there, Chief?
No, sir. I will say this, if you're interested, I have one of the regional manufacturers that makes this type of truck bringing one to our academy tomorrow, that we can just look over and make sure that it not only is it what we envision, but physically to look at one and make sure that this is exactly what we need to go for the city of New Haven. I have every confidence that it is.
Well, I can say, Chief, I would trust your word because I know very little about fire equipment. I know a fire extinguisher and I know a truck from an engine, and that's about where it ends.
Yes, sir.
Are there any questions from our committee members? We'll go around starting with Alder Crespo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first question that for me, I know that I was reading some of the material, and this is going over to Woodward, if I'm not mistaken. When are we going to get one in Fairhaven?
We just put a brand new engine in Fairhaven in the last 4 months, engine 10.
Gotcha. But is it the same as this Quint?
No, sir. Different operational capabilities.
Okay.
Sir, the main reason for the Quint is the elevated water, and it's carrying foam for the fuel tanks, not only for aircraft firefighting, but also in the petroleum tank farms as well.
Very good. Appreciate it. That was it for me, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Alder Crespo. Next in line is Alder Roth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks so much for the presentation. I had just a few questions. I guess, how likely are we to get the grant funding?
Well, you know, these fire, called assistance to firefighter grants, they are extremely, extremely competitive. And we are up against so many departments nationwide. I think it comes down to, you know, writing a good grant, you know, painting the picture of the need. And what they look at, number one, is financial need. And I think we do a real good job in making sure that they understand that without the federal government stepping in and giving this to us, we're just not going to be afforded in the city. Very similar to a lot of the grants that we get through the assistance to firefighter program. So I don't want to sound, you know, overly optimistic, but I think we're in a really good position from the city standpoint, and from not only just financial need, but I think the chief paints a picture of good operational need. And I think it'd be worthwhile for the federal government to allow this and to fund it. And look, I hope we get it. Every time we write a grant, we write it with the intention that we will get it. But again, very, very competitive. And we have gotten a grant from the Assistance to Firefighters Grant through Homeland Security and FEMA 4 years in a row. So let's make it 5. And I think it will be a great enhancement to the entire system.
And all the
Do you have a sense when we hear if we get the grant or not?
Yeah, it's you know, a lot of people are working from home, so folks are very aggressive. But we're looking at sometime the grant process will start. The awards will typically start in June, and then they'll go through. There's many rounds, so somewhere between June and September, we should have a good understanding of whether or not we will.
Great, thank you. Just 2 other questions. I think actually, Nikki, the legislative staff noted that the 10% number that you all have is not quite 10% of the 895,455. It's slightly below, so I wasn't sure if that was math error or it's just not quite 10%.
No, there's actually no math error. Once you put in the city of New Haven, we are actually due to the size of the population, it's 10%, but they cut it down a little, so the number may not be 10, it may be 9%, but we don't actually fill that in. That block actually self-populates, and that's what the number comes out. So it wasn't an error. It's just the way it is.
Great. Well, it's in our favor, so that's
Yes.
good.
Yep.
And then my final question, I'm actually just curious how the sort of next oldest big piece of apparatus that you'd be looking to replace, how old is it? Is it anywhere close to as old as what you're looking to replace here?
I don't have those numbers in front of me, but the chief may be able to.
Sure. So what my plan when I was first, thank you all, Ralph, for that question. When I was first hired as your chief, I had a plan of purchasing a truck the first year and 2 engines the next year, a truck, 2 engines, a truck, in a 5-year plan. Obviously, several things have happened during that time, but in the addition portion of that, we also are always applying for grants, and utilizing capital dollars as well to lower the age of the fleet. So it really depends. And Alder Crespo, this was a great question that you asked. Why not Fairhaven? Well, we look at the data. We look at the number of runs that an engine may go on. We may be able to take an engine that's very busy here, replace it and put it in a less traveled house, if you will, less active house, and still get more use out of it. So it becomes an operational concern for us. I believe the next one should be 10A. However, we still have trucks that we may want to replace based on the plan that I have that may come out of capital. So we make the case for grants based on need and age, but when we make the case for the city, it is operational and it has to be replaced based on where they are. In other words, I'm just going to use a generic. Station 1 may be out the door 24 hours a day. It's not an age issue, it's a wear and tear issue. It may reach the point of prohibitive cost and economic diminishing return. And so that is what drives it. It's operational, it's availability, and it's also where it is and what it does.
Great. Thank you.
Alder Smith, you're next. Sorry, you have no questions?
No questions, sir.
Okay, thank you. All right, are there any other questions that would go around again, just to make sure? Nothing? We're good? All right, and I think we've finished that part of the presentation. And that's it
Mr.
for
Chair?
our Alder Crespo.
My apologies, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to ask, just a point of clarity, by when is this particular item or this particular application need to be submitted? And do we need to submit a request for approval in unanimous consent in order to expedite the process, or does it go through the normal first reading, second reading, communications, first reading, second reading, and ultimately be voted upon?
Yeah, that's a great question. We actually have the grant was just recently submitted, so we've got some time before we have any of that. Again, before it goes for reading, because the grant has not been awarded. This was just really to ensure that that having the approval to go forward with putting it in. We'd like to do it a lot early, but unfortunately, these grants do not have a big window of opportunity. So the notice of funding, what we call is notice of funding opportunity, the NOFO comes out. It gives you about 30 days. So we have an idea when it may be coming, but we don't know. And really, we're under the gun. So the moment we found out, we started the paperwork and applied for the grant, and it'll be the next 3, 4, 5, or 6 months we should have an idea of whether or not we would receive the award. And we'll be reaching out to all of our folks at the federal level to hopefully the delegation to give us a good word. So we still have some time to go, sir.
Thank you, Director Fontana, and through the chair, if it's necessary, we could certainly, I guess, release the item as you see if needed, but I yield to your recommendation, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
At this point, I don't see that it needs to go to UC. We're in a position where in 2 weeks, it'll get first reading, and then 2 weeks after that. So by the end of April, we'll be done with our legislative process.
Very good, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
And I think that's good enough time. Is that right, Chief or Rick?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The floor is open, Alder Crespo.
You're back, Mr. Chair. I'm all set. Thank you.
All right, are we closing the public portion?
I make a motion to close the public portion of this meeting.
Second,
Moved in second, but it is a public hearing and we have to ask the public for any comment.
I would withdraw my motion, Mr. Chair.
My mistake, I moved it ahead. Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment on this item? And please raise your hand so that we can see you. I'm going to try and look at the other side of the group here. Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment on this item? Again, is there anyone from the public who would like to comment on this item? Seeing none, Alder Crespo.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to close the public portion of this meeting or the public hearing.
I'll second it now.
All right, it's moved and seconded. Any questions, comments? Then all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? There are none, so carried. Alder Crespo. We should vote on this item now because that closes our public portion, then we're going to the workshop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move the item, and I would ask that we grant the authorization for the mayor, as Director Fontana had prescribed in the letter he sent us, that we authorize the mayor to apply for the $895,455, if I'm not mistaken, which is the amount that they're applying for, and that we do so, grant that authority.
Second,
All right, moved and second. Any questions? Seeing none. All in favor of moving?
Just a comment.
Alder Crespo.
I want to certainly, I think we're all in favor, but definitely I see it as getting a truck, or a brand new quint for $81,455. So that's something that we want to take advantage of. And just like Director Fontana stated, we hope we can get it. We certainly will make the argument that we need it, especially during this pandemic and the fiscal challenges that we're facing, as you have heard from the Finance Committee. So I definitely approve, and I certainly ask and urge my committee members, which I don't need to, but I certainly would like to demonstrate my approval and my desire to approve this item. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Crespo. I'll just add that between the chief and the emergency operations, we've been doing pretty well. We've got 2 pieces already, right? 2 new pieces this year, Chief?
Yes, sir. We purchased those though, but we have been successful with grant applications, as you said, for the last 4 years with radios and accountability and increased safety for our firefighters. Yes, sir. We've been all right, 4 for 4.
Yes, and that's what I'm looking at. Overall city, no matter who pays. I mean, yes, it certainly is great to save $800,000, but whenever we can make it safer for our community, that's the number one things in our minds. So seeing no other comments, call for a vote. All in favor of passing this item, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? There are no opposed. Item passes, and it will be sent forward to the next meeting. Thank you, Chief, Rick, and the entire staff. Kayla did a great job on your paperwork again, as usual.
She's the best. She keeps us straight with the on the financial management of it going forward. So thank you, Kayla, because it's important.
She actually gets down to the half a cent, which is amazing to me. So I want to thank you so much. And I want to thank the public safety, and through the chair, thank you for your members for your continued support of our department and our mission to keep the city of New Haven safe. Thank you.
Thank you for your time and all the efforts you put into it. I wouldn't want to be a firefighter. Thank you, Chief. All right, we'll move on to the second portion of our meeting tonight, which is a workshop. Now, for those who are not familiar, I'll first tell you this, that this process of the workshop is unlike a public hearing. This is generally a meeting where there is no public testimony. There will be no legislative action usually at the conclusion of this meeting. We will hear testimony from those requested to testify on the various issues at hand. This is a way for the Board of Alders and the community to gain some information that could possibly lead to a public hearing later on, or maybe not. Now, first I'll ask for those from our emergency communications to explain their department and how it functions. And I may ask for input from some others in the audience. Then I will ask our committee members to present their questions and or concerns so that we can get a good rounded feeling of what is happening in that particular division. I'll remind all those speaking tonight to give their name and address of record at the beginning of their presentation. I'd like to welcome George Pete, the Director of the Emergency Communications. You know how much I hate that PSAP, right? Sounds so nasty. And Deputy Director, Jeff Patton. And we also
me both, sir. You and me both.
We also have our Deputy CAO, Rebecca Bombero, on to support. So we will start with you, Rebecca. Do you want to start off, or you want George?
I defer to the department.
Mr. Pete, you're on. We would like you to explain your department, tell us what it's about, how it functions, that sort of thing, and we will go from there.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. My name is George Pete. I reside at 360 State Street here in the city of New Haven. I'm the Director of Public Safety Communications. Public Safety Communications is a department of 44, one director, a deputy director, 8 supervisors. Supervisors are floor supervisors, operational. They're there 24/7. And then we have the balance is 911 operator dispatchers. Our operation consists of receiving 911 calls for both police, fire, and EMS. The EMS portion is what they call EMD, which stands for Emergency Medical Dispatch Questioning. They question the callers through a scripted system, in questioning what their emergency is, and then how they can help them medically to give pre-arrival instruction. They answer 911 calls for law enforcement, and actually they answer 911 calls for fire department. We have 4 radio dispatch positions, actually 5, I'm sorry, 5 radio dispatch positions. The city of New Haven splits the police operation into east and west. There's a west radio dispatcher and an east radio dispatcher. And the fire department, which handles EMS, are 2 radio dispatchers who work together as a team, supporting one another, because there's an awful lot of work that goes on that 2 people must take care of, too much for just one. There's also a position that runs license checks and registration checks over a particular radio channel for the police officers. That's our 5th radio position. The department is primarily funded by the state 911 fund. That's the tax you see on your phone, both your landline phone and your cell phone, the 911 tax. The department is funded from the city out of the general fund, mainly salaries and a small amount for its overtime and our phone bill. The department has ongoing training all the time. We have one supervisor whose focus is training. There's always ongoing training. There's always certifications that must be kept up, and training as needed when issues pop up in relationship to the QA program we have. The state recommends we have a quality assurance program for EMT calls. However, We've expanded that to include law enforcement calls and just all calls that come across both emergency and non-emergency lines. That is pretty much it in a nutshell. If there's anything else I can answer about the operation, myself or the deputy.
All right, we weren't necessarily looking for a nutshell, but it's a good start.
Sure.
So I will ask my colleagues to present any questions or concerns they have then, unless Ms. Bombero or Mr. Patton would like to offer anything before that.
I would just like to clarify the statement of the staffing level. The department is staffed at 55 positions, 44 are operators, 8 supervisors, director, deputy director, and an administrative assistant. That's the total staffing of the department, 55 members.
Okay, then we'll start with Alder Crespo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask first, do we, given that there's many, as the chief had explained, there's multiple ongoing training, certifications, especially for folks that have to, of course, due to the quality assurance program, to answer calls for EMT and for services that are emergent and non-emergent, do we have certified, qualified interpreters? The reason I ask is because recently in the last week, for example, there was an incident at a site and an individual, an elderly person was involved in a hit and run. And unfortunately, when I provided the non-emergency number and they called, it does give you the option to select, please press, I believe, 2 for if you need to speak, if you need someone to speak in Spanish, or 2 for Spanish. But when the person was on the line, I decided to stay just a little bit just to see if I can help. When the person got the actual dispatcher, the dispatcher said, "I'm sorry, there's nobody right now that speaks Spanish. Sorry." So I picked up the phone and talked to someone. So do we have qualified, certified interpreters?
Yeah, so go ahead, Jeff. I'll let you answer that.
Okay, I was going to ask. We have bilingual dispatchers. It's a separate position that is filled when there's vacancies in it, but all positions are bid by seniority. So there are certain days of the week, certain times of the day that we are not necessarily have one of our bilingual operators available at that point in time. We bid in accordance with the collective bargaining agreement and the union guidelines. And sometimes it happens that people with certain skill sets have a certain amount of seniority that allows them to pool on one shift versus another. So there are potentially times of day that you might get the call into the center and there not be someone that is necessarily Spanish speaking. We do not have anyone that's bilingual in a language other than Spanish. And we are working to try and get with the city a contract with a language line translation service outside of what's provided by the state through 911, but that can only be used for a 911 or emergency call. If it is an emergency and they called on 6316 and you need to find out what it is, you can use it. We just explained to the state what the circumstances were. That's all. But we are looking to try and get our own service to meet those needs when we don't have bilingual people available. And we're going to probably look to schedule a test for bilingual again, just to replenish the ranks with some people with lower seniority so that they're going to trickle into the shifts that aren't so desired by some.
Thank you. I appreciate that explanation. My second question would be, when a person calls the 911 number or the non-emergency, of course, I am privy to the numbers that the department has for the FD and the PD. But once it's dispatched, or I guess my question is, when when a 911 call is made or a non-emergency call is made, how long before the dispatcher releases that information to the appropriate department, and then the department, having that knowledge, would then respond to that particular individual or victim? I guess just for clarity, I guess let me make it clear. If I were to call a non-emergency number, how soon will the dispatcher be able to, be able to say, let me relay now the message over to the appropriate department, and then they'll be able to respond?
All right, so
Before we get an answer for that, Jeff, we didn't get your name and address for the records, please.
my name is Jeffrey Patton. My address is 45 Hemlock Road in Meriden, Connecticut. I am the Deputy Director of Public Safety Communications, and I apologize for that oversight.
Thank you.
Alder Crespo, to address your inquiry, when the calls come in, dependent on the nature of the call itself, if someone calls in and says this house is on fire, it's pretty obvious what the response is. So the call taker has the ability to immediately transfer that information, the address and the fact that it is a box alarm for fire dispatch response. They push one button and it goes over to the fire dispatcher that was then responsible for processing that within a defined time period. And it's the I always forget the name of the insurance agency that sets the standard, but it's a national standard for the length of time.
NFPA.
Thank you. I always ask you when I never remember a name. So then they begin the response as soon as they get that information on the board, because in that case, it's very urgent to get as quick a response as possible. In the cases of some medical calls, you might have to ask a couple of questions to determine the absolute nature of the medical emergency to make sure that the proper response, the right units go to deal with the issue that is the cause of the call. That sometimes takes maybe 30 seconds to a minute to determine. And then with non-emergency calls on 6316 for police response, there are more questions that we try to ascertain and gather useful information to provide responding units with as much useful information as we can possibly extract from the caller. But again, if at any point in time during the call, they can identify what the nature of the call is and the location of the call, just like they do for fire, they push one button and that goes right over to the police dispatch. So even if somebody were to call on the non-emergency number and say they're shooting on the corner of this street and that street, we know where it is, we know what it is, we can immediately put that information over to the next step so that that person can immediately begin getting units to respond.
Great. Thank you, Chief Patton. Thank you, Mr. Chair. No further questions at this time.
Before we go on to Alder Roth, I really need to push a piece, and Alder Crespo was really easy on it. Surprised me, Alder Crespo. But I have a serious problem with not having a Spanish-speaking person on every shift, every day. There could be something, it doesn't have to be a 911 call, but something as simple as a person comes home and their house is broken into. It's not necessarily a 911 call, but they're trying to report a burglary and get someone out there to address it. And you may not have somebody there that can translate. Give me a break. Come on. What are you doing to resolve that kind of problem?
Yes, that's a great point, Alder. It's something we're trying to work out through negotiations with the union. They're able to bid, dispatchers are able to bid their shift strictly by seniority and not based upon what we need for the operation. And that's a huge hindrance for us, not only for, first and foremost, like you're stating, for language, but also for skill set. You may have a dispatcher who's working their way up through the skills from call taker to fire dispatcher to police dispatcher, and they haven't made it to police dispatch yet. And now today we're short police dispatchers. And I've got call takers and one police dispatcher it doesn't work out for us, and it's going through, it's being addressed through contract negotiations. It was my predecessor's problem as well. Having operators bid their position solely by seniority does not operationally work.
So do we really need to look at changing the requirement and making bilingual a requirement for those positions?
You know, part of me says that would be a great thing. I mean, I thought that's a win-win. The city back probably Rob Smutt's time is when they started to address this, where they said every other civil service exam would be a bilingual exam. And that was in an effort to bring up the ranks of bilingual Spanish speakers, particularly because of the population of our city. Personally, I think that'll be a win-win situation to have bilingual across the board. And not only just Spanish, we have other communities in the city as well.
Are there any efforts? And I'm sorry, I apologize, Alder Roth. You will get your entire time. Just kind of burns me up a little bit. I mean, this is serious because of the population we have here. Is there any effort to do any recruiting in Hispanic communities for that position, those jobs? I mean, I'm not much worried about a dispatcher because dispatchers are talking to firefighters and police officers who all speak English.
Right. No, everyone enters the job as a call taker. And just if you made it as a dispatcher, you're a dispatcher one day on the schedule, and the next day you're a call taker. That the positions rotate. But there is no effort to reach out specifically to the Spanish community. No, there is not. Other than when the test comes out being advertised as a bilingual exam, and you have to go through the testing procedures to prove that you're able to speak the language very proficiently in a testing atmosphere. Other than that, no, there's not.
Okay, I mean, recruiting is important. I think that's something you should put on your list. You know, they do it in the police and the fire department. They recruit from all different communities, so we get a good cross section of those people needed.
Sure, agreed.
So
Agreed.
you should do the same thing.
Agreed.
And I'm sorry, I yield to you, Alder Roth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and those were important questions. I'm glad you interjected with them. And thanks for the presentation. It would be great if you could just give more detail on the staffing. I guess a few questions. I didn't totally follow if sort of people who do fire, police, EMS, if it's the same set of people who can do all three, or if those are different sets. And I'm just trying to think through your staffing model. If you, based on days of the week, times of day, if you look at the trends and you have a certain number of people based on those trends, and kind of how many on emergency versus non-emergency. I just don't have a sense of how that is. So if you could walk through that, that would be great.
Sure, absolutely. I'm going to let Jeff take it, as schedule is, he's in charge of operations, and that operations is certainly the schedule.
So I take a very in-depth look at our call data, the volume of calls coming in, the volume of calls for service we're sending to our partner agencies. I staff the room for a minimum number of call takers. We always have round the clock 2 fire dispatchers, 2 police dispatchers. The number of call takers, and each call taker is responsible for both emergency and non-emergency calls. But that varies by hour of the day and day of the week based on an assessment of 3 years worth of call data, so that we know on average during these times of day, on these days of the week, whether it's expected to be busier or less busy. And after analyzing the data, a little curve shows exactly where you need the people and how many people you should have. And then we build our staffing model off of that. We aim to have an adequate number of call takers and 1 over the minimum, with voluntary overtime if necessary based on people's vacations or sick time or things of that nature. But we don't mandate people to stay and work except to keep us at minimum staffing. We don't mandate people to give us that 1 over cushion, but we make it available to those that are volunteering to keep us 1 above the minimum. That would be a comfort zone, but we have the minimum number, and that's what we draw the line at.
Great. Thank you very much for explaining that. I guess I have a question, because I know this has come up and you all have been helpful with the question of like when something should be called as an emergency call versus a non-emergency call. And I guess it's somewhat of a two-part question. Do you find you have a problem with the emergency line being blocked at times when people really have an emergency because people are incorrectly calling it? And if that is the case, what can you all do to sort of give better guidance to the public as to like when exactly, like what should we go to the emergency line versus the non-emergency line?
So any call that comes into the 911 center, if it comes in on the 911 trunk, trunks are phone lines. If it comes in on the 911 trunk and it's not an emergency, the 911 operator has the ability to quickly forward that call to a non-emergency line. So one of the things that we have always taught since the day that I was a call taker is if you're about to call and you don't know whether you should call 911 or non-emergency, the moment that you question yourself, you've already answered your question, call 911. It's the 911 operator can always push you immediately onto a non-emergency line. So there's no problem with that.
Thank you. I guess, and I'll stick to 3 questions for now, and then we can go back around. My final question is, I know the community crisis program is something that the city is planning to do a pilot of, and I'm curious from your perspective, what what would have to be changed, what training would have to happen so that you would be able to effectively be part of that new system?
Go ahead, Jeff. I'm going to let you take that.
I believe we're talking about the community crisis response team where they're looking. Okay, so I have been working with those people putting together that program. Primarily for our department, it would be tracking the number of times and for what types of calls various resources from other agencies are requested, whether it be by fire, police, or medical personnel, or whomever says we need such and such an asset on this type of call. For us, it falls under the genre of communicating to them if we are asked to by the units in the street. Although a lot of times the police supervisors will have direct contact lines to some of these agencies and they'll reach out to them themselves. We just ask that they tell us that they're getting help from this agency so that we can keep record of it in our CAD system, which keeps a record of all of the calls for service that all of the New Haven agencies go to. And then we can see on this particular incident, on this day, at this time, at this location, they brought in this other service to assist them in it. And it's basically for record keeping because the CAD system is by default just a keeper of records of the activity done by the departments and the personnel assigned to them at that point in time. We just use it to keep track of whether a call comes to us from 211, we can track the source of the call, and whether an outside agency like the Yale Child Study, just as an example, if they are going out to assist police officers, firefighters with distraught children that have been displaced due to whatever, then we can just add that those agencies were present on this call. And then when you do a statistical analysis, you can see how often they're used and what they're used for.
So thank you. Oh,
I just wanted to elaborate. So Jeff's describing a lot of the planning process and phase 1 of the project. It is anticipated that phase 1 would inform the full implementation, which might lead to some diversion of calls, in which case we would have to work on standard operating procedures and question sets, and that would trigger additional training so that call takers could screen the calls. But again, as Jeff mentioned, there's a lot of data collection that needs to go in, and the folks boots on the ground have to determine what type of calls need those services.
no, thank you both. That's very helpful. My follow-up call was going to be what Becky just explained, that this is kind of your data collection phase, but then during the actual, once it were operational, PSAP would be the ones who would divert as need be and would be trained to know where things go. Is that accurate?
Yes, but if I can add, Alter, that is accurate. Remember, when I started speaking this evening, I mentioned EMD, emergency medical dispatch. And again, the description of that is it's scripted. The call taker follows a script, asks scripted questions. We would need to build some sort of scripted questioning process for callers to work our way down to equal out who is going to respond, so that each call is treated in the same form and fashion.
Great. Thank you all very much.
Remind our speakers again, name and address of record.
All right, Rebecca Bombero, 122 West Rock Avenue, New Haven, Connecticut. Apologize.
Thank you. Are you through, Alder Roth? For now?
I'll defer to my colleagues, and then if there's something else, I'll ask it then.
All right. Alder Smith, you're next.
I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to ask a few. I just find it so hard to believe that there is not one Hispanic worker that works for PSAP. Was I hearing that correctly? Do you have any Hispanic workers that work into PSAP?
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely we do. Yes.
We're just not utilizing them because of, you said, union protocols. Was that correct?
We utilize them. They're allowed to bid based on their seniority. So if they're senior enough, the majority of them will get the same hours, 8 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, just for an example. So there's fewer of them available for 4 in the afternoon till midnight, or midnight till 8 in the morning. It's simply a mechanism of the rules that we have to operate under and how we divide our workforce. They're allowed to bid the hours of the day they want based on seniority and the days off they get, because everyone gets 2 consecutive days off, and that's determined by seniority. So by the way they fall out, you may end up with a time of day or a day of the week where at that point in time, there isn't necessarily one present. Or if there was one on the shift, they may have gone out to their lunch break and they're not there at the moment that that person did call. So at this point, there isn't, I would say approximately a third, 25% to 33% of the employees were classified as bilingual call takers. If that bilingual call taker is currently assigned to another function in the department, they are able to pick up and interpret for someone, but somebody has to cover their role that they were doing. If they were fire dispatching, they can move and get a phone, but somebody else has to watch their fire board while they're doing the other thing. We do that as much as we can, but there's, at least as we are staffed at this point in time, I don't know of a way to guarantee that we would absolutely always have 24/7, 365 a Spanish speaker, unless we somehow or other negotiated with the union to change the bidding rules. And that's a conversation for somewhere else.
Thank you. I would like to address my questions to Mr. Pete, if possible.
Certainly.
Is there equality in all aspects of the day today in the room? And my next one, to follow up with that, are all employees treated equally? Are they treated equally gender basis, or racial bias, or preferable treatment being done into the room?
Absolutely. That is one of the most important things to myself personally. It's one of the most important things I express to my staff. I can't express that any more that is. There's many times where I'm questioned, well, why am I doing this, and why am I doing that? And my answer to them, I need to be fair and equitable across the board. People need an opportunity to prove their ability for the job, whether they be whatever their race is, whatever their gender is. None of that has any place in our department.
My next question for you, Mr. Peak, are the SOPs regularly or consistently following and enforced? And for those that don't know what SOP is the standard operating procedures. Are they being enforced?
Yes, the supervisors, their job, because they're there 24/7, are to enforce SOPs. That's the reason we have SOPs, those are standard operating procedures, SOPs, and we also have SOGs, or standard operating guidelines, and all are enforced. And those are used to, if necessary, discipline off of where people violate those SOPs. We will refer back to the SOP policy and find that in the discipline.
So are you consistent in counseling employees towards improving performance?
Yes, again, that kind of relates back to our quality assurance. We have a quality assurance program that's across the board for all type. The state requires just EMD, but we put it across the board for everything, for police calls as well. We like to make sure that we are being consistent with enforcing.
I'm going to ask this last question and then I'm going to defer it because I have a lot more questions to ask to Mr. Pete. But how often should an employee be expected to be Signal 111? And what is the norm for the industry?
So that's a rough question because that depends upon, the staffing. Like Deputy Patton had mentioned, there's different staffing levels at different times of the day.
George, we have other people listening, so explain to them what 111 is.
Oh, sure. So a 111 was a signal code that was started by the police department and inherited into the communications department. Signal 111 is mandatory holdover. So if you're working an 8 to 4 shift and you are 111, you're mandatorily held into another 8-hour shift. So if we are short-staffed and nobody voluntarily takes the overtime, we have a rotating list to keep it fair for people to take their turn to be 111 as long as they're able to do the job. Naturally, skill set comes into works there. If you're not trained to be a police dispatcher and it's an open police dispatch, we'll have to skip a name and get to the next available police dispatcher. How often can they expect it? It's totally driven by attendance and by our ability to keep the department staffed.
This last question, Sir Chair, then I will refer it to the colleagues. I'm sorry, but I think this is an important question for Mr. Pete. PSAP worked continuously throughout this pandemic. What are you doing to ensure the mental health? That's one question. And are you continuing to enforce workplace COVID standards by folks wearing masks, social distancing, and physical barriers? What preventative measure have you implemented to keep the room COVID free?
So we always, all the way to down to the level of the supervisors. Supervisors during our supervisor meeting are instructed to check in on their, we call them team players, to do a mental check-in, to make observations. We utilize the city's EAP system, Employee Assistance Program. Employees are always reminded that my door is open, the deputy's door is open. People are given opportunities to just get up and take a break when they need to, take a walk. We have started a weekly update. In that weekly update, we try to include mental health reminders, how to help yourself during stress, how to keep yourself stress-free at home once you leave the job. We try to hire in at least 2 or 3 times a year an outside agency to talk about stress and how to handle it. As far as COVID, we recently set up barriers. The city had a contractor come in and put barriers up between all the operators. We are now wearing our masks at all times. When things first got started, the health department was in the train of thought that the operators should wear their masks when they were up or turned facing another coworker, but if they were turned around facing just their cubicle with the glass and just facing their computer screens, that they would be able to take it down. We've changed that so that now the operators have to wear the mask at all times. Supervisors are instructed to make sure that these are followed. We start with a documented conversation with someone if they begin to violate these regulations, and then progressive discipline from that point forward. There's reminders up throughout the room and throughout the building to wash your hands, to be social distancing. There is distancing markers on the floor, on the door. There's information telling you that you need to wear a mask to enter the room. We try to limit the visitors that are coming in the room. We supply sanitary wipes and all necessary things to clean everyone's workstation. We did have the fire department come in once a week to fog a antiviral fogging disinfectant. Recently, I purchased one for our department so we could do it ourselves. We try to have the 10 to 10 supervisors take on that responsibility, so it's still being done daily. We encourage people not to share paper. We give them their own pens. We've limited the break room to one person. We've enforced that by taking furniture out of the break room, so there's no place much more for one person to be in. And we're looking to further possibly, for lack of a better description, box the call takers and dispatchers in a little more so than what we're instructed to do by the engineering department of the city when they came to have an inspection. We had the layout of the room inspected by the health department and went with their recommendations on how to keep people as safe as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to defer to others that have questions, and then you can come back to me. Thank you, Mr. Pete.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Alder Smith. I think I'll throw in one or two. George, I was told recently there was a fire dispatcher or fire apparatus dispatched to the wrong address on a fire, which ultimately resulted in a lot of damage to a resident's home. Can you tell me something about that? Did it happen? What did you do to resolve that issue or prevent it from happening again?
So I did not hear anything from the fire department. I did hear from our own QA people. Again, we have our own QA. That was the case. The call taker, we have an SOP that requires call takers get cross streets. The call taker did not get the cross street, failed to get the cross streets. That call taker is beginning the disciplinary process as well as being remedially trained to get the cross streets. I don't believe there was a large delay, but there was a delay and it was picked up by our Q&A people.
Well, from information I got, it was quite a distance, a difference from one side of town to the other. And I know this piece of fire apparatus is not going, but it still requires a different call, another truck or engine to go out.
Right. If we could consider any of it being lucky, we were lucky that it was a distance apart because it was a totally different response, which didn't rely on one of those trucks having to turn around on the street and go back to the other side of the city. It was on the other. It was I believe it was
Howard Street and Howard Avenue.
Howard Street and Howe, correct.
Well, so what was the resolution? How did you deal with that shortfall of the information goes from the call taker forwarded correct. To the dispatcher, correct?
That is correct.
So the dispatcher received the incorrect information from the call taker?
from the call taker who did not get to cross streets and heard the wrong street. That's correct.
Okay, so you did some remedial training on that.
Absolutely. It's picked up by the QA people, remedial training, and we have begun the disciplinary process as that person is also a brand new person still on probation.
Okay, and since we're talking about training, is there like police or fire? Is there any in-service training that's
Absolutely.
held regularly, and by whom, where?
Yes, so there is, like you will call it, in-service training. We have it regularly. We have slowed down a bit, I will say, over the past year because of COVID. We just recently have started. We started today, as a matter of fact, with customer service training. I instituted in the department a group of people called CTOs, Certified Training Officers. We sent them to school to learn how to be training officers in the dispatch world of call taking and radio use. And these CTOs are the people who put on classes for these, like what we're going to call in-service training. And we will pick up the need for a class based upon problems and incidents such as the cross streets, for example, that we're having, or we see beginning to have a problem in specific area. We'll have a class on that, as well as ongoing mandatory classes. In other words, collect has to be, recertified on collect. EMD, they need to be recertified on EMD. So those are always on, those are examples of always ongoing training. And we fill in with as need training as well.
And that required training, that state required training, how often is that?
The collect is, Jeff will be able to answer a little clearer than I can't remember collect, how often it is.
Collect is 2 years, and the Power Phone EMD is also 2 years. The telecommunicator training, the certificate for it is an ongoing certificate as long as you continue to work in the field 4 out of the previous 5 years. They'll renew your certificate as a telecommunicator as long as you stay in the field, and there's nothing that gets you removed from. If you lose your EMD certification, if you lose your collect certification or any of that, then you're subject to losing your telecommunicator certification.
Okay, thank you. Was somebody keeping track? Was that my 3 questions? Well, I'll defer then to Alder Crespo. More questions, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to follow up. I appreciate George Pete. He actually answered some of my questions regarding the now that we are in a pandemic, how the offices are taking the strategies to minimize exposure or help their workers be more safe. I just wanted to ask, have they been surveyed, or have you provided a survey to the department in order to see where they stand with their desire to take the coronavirus vaccine, such as Moderna, Pfizer's, Johnson & Johnson? Have they considered taking it? Only because since I work in healthcare, the clinical chiefs have been advised that whenever there is a small group of individuals within a conference room, let's say you have 5 to 6 employees, if they've all been vaccinated, they no longer have to wear the mask. They're able to remain socially distant, and it makes it easier for them to collaborate and work. So I just wanted to ask, have they been surveyed to see if they would consider taking the vaccine, or if they would like to take it, have they been granted the opportunity to do so and the information needed?
So no, we have not put out any kind of survey. We kind of pushed to get the department up with the firefighters and police officers when they were vaccinated, and at first we got a little pushback, but eventually we did get into the line, and the department was allowed to get vaccinated. Quite a few people did take advantage of that. However, no, we did not put out a survey, but we've tried through pretty much through the I was a Marine, we called it scuttlebutt, but so from people talking, just to try to motivate people to get the vaccine, to talk positively about it, have let's go back to those CTOs, right? have the CTOs talk positively about it when they talk with people. But we can't force it, and there's a lot of people who have a lot of apprehension about doing it. And I'm not sure we're at a point where we would say we would take our masks off, even if somebody was or wasn't vaccinated, because we work in such close quarters. That's something I would defer to the health department before we made that kind of decision like that.
I got it.
That is a good idea, possibly, to put out a survey through their email. We can do it through, like I said, our weekly update, and that everyone was made aware of the time to get vaccinated through the weekly update as well. The weekly update is it's just a sheet that's put out every Sunday by one of the supervisors who's taken on the responsibility, and it recognizes things in the room, from birthdays to training to reminders to SOP reminders. We spoke a while ago about mental health. They put mental health reminders in there and helpful hints, and keep people aware of things that are upcoming. And I believe it was mentioned in there for everyone to consider to go get the vaccine.
I appreciate it. And I also thank Alder Smith, who actually asked many questions that I had in mind pertaining to the pandemic, and also with regards to the 55 folks that are operating within your department. You have 55 total, 44 operators, 8 supervisors, and then it breaks down to director, assistant director, deputy director, administrative assistant. How many of those positions within the supervisory positions are held by other folks, bilingual, brown, black? How many individuals hold those positions?
So we have one black male, two Hispanic females, black female, white male, and a position right now.
And are any of them bilingual? And
Yes.
I'm just saying Spanish. I'm talking about any language. Okay.
Yes, 2.
Gotcha. And then about the operators, how many operators? Do you have the breakdown? Would you happen to know what is the breakdown of the operators?
I don't off the top of my head, but if I had to guess and give a number right now in front of you, it'd be between 12 and 14. I believe Deputy Patton had mentioned that he had more of a fraction of what it would be, but if I had to pull it off the top of my head right now, I'd say between 12 and 14.
Okay. And so that would give it approximately, I'm going to say, if you have 14 out of 40, that would be probably around a 28%, maybe, if you will. So my other question is marketing. How would I let my constituents know? How would we, the Board of Alders, know? And I apologize, Mr. Chair, if I'm taking too much time. I just wanted to ask, how do we know that you're hiring? Do you have hiring initiatives? Because I do remember that when you were explaining about hiring, I think 3 times a year, would you bring forth someone who provides like stress or how to manage your stress, and folks that can come in as professionals to provide the employees the ability to talk about that. When you do hiring initiatives, how many times does that happen during the year, and how do you relay those messages out? Have you considered partnering with New Haven Works, local agencies, Junta, folks like maybe putting posters or flyers in the libraries? I know that not many people are going to the libraries now, but I know that libraries have a good interaction with the community, and they're often sending emails. What about the city's website? Have those been posted on the city website? And how do you recruit? What is your strategy for recruiting local talent, given that we have much of the constituents, much of the community that would be interested? As a matter of fact, many years ago, I'm going to say probably 4 years ago, I was interested in telecommunication, and I was interested in probably becoming a dispatcher myself. But I didn't know how to get there. When I finally did some research, I found out that you needed to have a certification, and before you can apply, there were certain different steps.
So we do have a Facebook page. I believe it was put on there. I'm not sure if it was put onto the city's website or not, but that is one of our shortfalls is probably getting the word out that we are hiring. A long time, communications had very long time long-lasting employees. Those are a lot of older people, and those older people since retired, and we have younger people, and younger people don't stay around quite as long. So we have been having a tremendous turnover of recent. So I think that is something that we need to address, something that we need to get out there and find a way and follow our partners in finding a way to better advertise when we are hiring, other than just relying on the city's website or the city's advertisement, and get out there and do something of our own. I started a public awareness and safety committee, and what they do is they work together to hook up with Board of Alders for management and community meetings. We uniformed them very nicely in a dress uniform so they can go and represent the city and the department very well. And their title is Public Education and Awareness. COVID really set us back with that, where we couldn't do anything. So they've really taken a back seat, and I think that harmed us as well, because we were making some great strides with that, visiting places like Bella Vista, and the management meetings when they had them. So I think that's going to be a great asset to us in the future as well.
And I just want to elaborate a little bit. So our PSAP dispatchers are civil service positions. So like all city positions, they go through HR. When we have an opening, it's posted on the city's website. The alders, as you know, all city employees get that notice of postings of city jobs. So then those are tested. Once the list is certified, it's good for a year, and we continue to hire off that list as vacancies occur. We've been going through that list. I think we're getting towards the end of it. So there's likely to be another recruitment process again. And we'll do outreach to you specifically in addition to that email you receive of notice of posting. So you can help let constituents know about that opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, just one more question before I finish this round. I just wanted to ask, because this has to do exactly with recruitment. Have you considered or has PSAP considered partnering with agencies like maybe the American Job Centers that are able to secure funding, state funding, like for dislocated worker grants, or for folks that work in workforce innovative and opportunity grants, those who are getting JFIS funds to, for example, if somebody's needing a certification, organizations like the American Job Center is willing to pay, I believe, $3,500 or whatever it is needed in order to have a candidate. So if you're going to recruit, they can actually pay for those certifications, and then now you have not only the person that's qualified, but you can also have a pool where you can select folks from that particular pool.
I think coming close to what you're saying, again, before COVID, we were starting to put programs together where we'd be able to get out into the schools and make it part of the curriculum, part of the public. There's a public safety, forgive me, I can't remember the name, but there's a public safety, like a public safety team where they try to entice students to become police officers, firefighters. We wanted to get involved with that as well, so we could be right there, kind of enticing students to think about the 911 and dispatch world, as well as police officer and firefighter. I look forward to getting into that again. We started to work with the company who provides our EMP, that's those scripted cards again, with them to see if they would put some kind of program together so we could begin to teach the program in school, and kind of getting along the lines of exactly what you're saying, where we would have people that already had an idea and already had some training before they hit the ground to take the test. So I think that's a great idea, and I think that's definitely coming in the very near future, as soon as we get past, I guess, a lot of this COVID stuff and so forth. I think it's fantastic to get the young people and the young people of the city involved. Just over 40% of our department are New Haven residents, and I think, being a New Haven resident, answering the phone for New Haven residents has a big impact. maybe you'll care just that little bit, that little bit more because it's your city. It could be your neighbors. It could be your family. I think that's something that we've been striving for, and I think it's something that we need to strive even a little harder for.
Thank you, George. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And Alder Roth, before we go to you, I see our vice chair has arrived. And I would like our vice chair to introduce himself, and then you have the floor, sir.
Brian Wingate, Ward 29, Beaver Hills. Thank you so much, Chair. My apologies for being late tonight. Zooming. Thank you once again. Alder Crespo took my last 10 questions. I mean, Alder Crespo took a couple of my questions. I just want to say thank you for coming out tonight. And I do have one. I do have one. Right. My mind is at the place where we're trying to come out of the pandemic, right? Like we in that space, right? Like we're not out of it yet, but we are trying to work towards that, right? Is there a plan? Because I like the job conversation. Is there a plan to do a reach out, hands-on reach out as you come out of this pandemic, right? Considering that it is, local jobs for people that need them, right? Will there be a plan for something like that moving forward, right? For job opportunities, and if I can help, and putting agencies together, I like to be a part of it, right? If I can be a part of that, trying to help agencies and stuff like that, be a part of that, please, count me in. But if there's a plan, I would love to hear it. If not, let's work on one. No,
I something, I'm going to be very honest. I'm going to say I didn't really have a plan because we've been so stuck in COVID and like this tunnel. But as we move towards, we're at the end of the civil service exam, we're down towards the bottom of the list of people we're hiring off of now. As we begin to go and ask for another test and build another civil service exam, I am so anxious to get our public education and awareness team back out on the road. Let's call it out on the road, right? Mm-hmm. And have them back involved in the management meetings through the Board of Alders. And making, you people have really given me some great ideas on pursuing active recruiting for 911. Again, my mind in the past was with the schools, but I think there's other groups of folks out there that we can reach out to. And I think putting the money together to put a special uniform together of this public education and awareness group, this would be just another prime great example of where to utilize them in right up front. So I really look forward to being able to work with you and to be able to work with the whole board to do so.
Thank you. And thank you, Abby Roth.
Thank you, Alder Wingate.
All set, Mr. Vice Chair?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Can I just squeeze in a piece here, Alder Roth? Since we're talking about the jobs and whatnot, George, maybe you can work together with Becky and get to HR and find a way. We've got plenty of high schools in New Haven. And I would venture to say not half of the kids end up going to college. And here's a good opportunity for them to make good money. Yeah. And it may be a good time when it gets near graduation time to start getting that word out and do some work at the schools. Bring some flyers or some information, and maybe we can get HR to schedule a test someplace around maybe August or September, where we can grasp those kids that aren't going to be able to go to college and give them a way to make some money to go maybe 2 years down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And this position, I will say unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because we lose people. This position, as you know yourself, Mr. Chairman, it's been a springboard into the police department, has been a springboard into the fire department. I think it's a great place to start. It was a place for me that was my career. It's my passion. It still is to this day my passion. I love my job. It's everything I could think of for most of my life. And as I get ready to turn the chapter and retire, I want to see this and other people be as enthused as I was as a young man, and certainly as enthused as I was as a New Haven resident, that I was doing something for my community. I was doing it right here at home. So I was that person who was picking up the phone concerned about, oh my God, this could be my neighbor. Oh, this could be my friend. I think that holds tremendous weight. Have people from New Haven picking up the phone, working for New Haven.
Thank you. And thank you, Alder Roth. The floor is now yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yeah, just two things, well, three things. Just a comment on hiring New Haveners. I mean, another advantage, obviously, is also they're more familiar with the streets and locations, and I've got to believe that helps too.
Tremendously.
I appreciated what you just said about a lot of people using it as a springboard to joining the police department, because when you talked about a lot of turnover, obviously, the more turnover, the more you have to go through the hiring process and the training process and all of that. And so I guess, yeah, just maybe talk a little bit more about that. Is it that because people are just is there the turnover because people are moving on to a different job like that and it's a planned career step, or is it because there's a frustration with it that something could be addressed within PSAP that would encourage them to stay in that role, and then you wouldn't have that turnover?
So we have a turnover problems. There's a few different issues that are affecting our turnover problems. We have some people that are kind of rough to deal with in the department, and they're in the middle of disciplinary action. I would say that's more of a minor role, but that does exist. People, they work very tight. They work in very close quarters. They become another family. And when people see some dysfunction in families, they'll run away from it. More so, I would say our problem is our schedule. And we're bound to that schedule, like we talked earlier about bidding. We're bound to the schedule also by days off. Their days off are bid as well. A junior person is going to get Tuesday, Wednesday off. And they're going to see Tuesday, Wednesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Monday, Tuesday for at least 10 years. Whereas other municipalities work shifts that allow for a rotating day forward or rotating day backwards. Well, eventually, you're going to see a weekend off. You're going to see a holiday off. That we talked earlier about being fair and equitable. In my mind, that is the most fair and equitable thing for the entire workforce. From the most senior person to the most junior person, everyone is able to enjoy a weekend or a holiday or time off with their family, their friends. The way it is right now, they don't. So here in New Haven, we train them. We make a huge investment financially. They learn from one of the busiest cities in the state. We are number 2 in being busy. The busiest, for your own knowledge, the busiest is Hartford, New Haven, then Bridgeport. They're called the Big 3 amongst the 911 state 911 department. So they learn speed, and they learn huge volumes of calls. So when you've had that training and you're already certified and you apply that to some place, just off the top of my head, using it as an example, say Middletown or Derby or Greenwich, when they hear that you were a New Haven dispatcher, right away they take you. You don't have to pay for your certifications. New Haven already did that. They don't have to teach you speed. New Haven already did that. Because in their mind, if you can make it in New Haven, You can make it anywhere. And it's more attractive. The pay is a little bit higher, but I have heard more times than not, it's the schedule. My hands, like with the bilingual, are tied due to contract through the union.
And when, I should know this, but the contract runs until when? The current contract?
I believe it's up. I believe the city's thinking of, I believe there's somewhere near getting negotiation.
And thank you for walking through that. My final question, I was really interested with all the questions everyone asked about Spanish speakers were critical. The city has people who speak in so many other languages, and I appreciated Jeff Patton talking about looking to outsource the translation. Do you have any sense of the number of calls that come in that can't be responded to that are not in English or Spanish? I'm just curious what that volume is and how many different languages. I mean, you might not have that.
Definitely have a better handle on that.
That's a minuscule number. If we are incapable of communicating with the caller, we will at one point or another end up using the state's language translation to ensure that it isn't some type of an emergency. And then I will talk to the state about the reasons why we made the decision to use the tool they pay for and justify my decision that that's the appropriate way to determine. Because until I know something's not an emergency, how are you going to say it's not an emergency? There are very, very few. The police department has had some contact with people that speak languages that we had no ability to translate. They've reached out to Yale University. We get pretty creative in trying to find some way to communicate with a person. I do believe now the police department, at least for their detention facility, has a language line type of a service. And I'm in communications with them to try to bring that into our environment so that we can use it for the callers on the phones also. But we do take every effort to try to find out from every caller. But I would say probably 4 calls out of 10,000 might be ones where the caller gets so frustrated that they hang up. But that would be probably the high side of my estimate.
Thanks. And it sounds like you do have the ability to go to the state line now if when that does come up. So that's good to hear. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All said, Alder Roth. We're moving on to Alder Smith. 3 questions from you, ma'am.
Try to make my questions, get the important questions. So one of them, I heard you talking about the union, the way they have as far as staffing, correct? Someone that have done, let's say 10, 15, maybe 20 years, do you think their time should be changed for someone that's just coming in the department?
Explain to me this. I'm sorry, it's a little bit more what you mean.
You stated that it's a union problem with you staffing people or making changes. And I'm asking the question, if someone has worked for the department for, let's say 20 years, and someone's just coming into the department, you don't feel that the seniority should rule?
The seniority should rule for many things, but for the best management of the department, and I believe for best management for fair and equitable and our ability to keep employees rotating, I think you're talking about rotating days off, is the better option to go. Your seniority would still bid you what shift you'd like to work, whether it be days or mid shift or midnights, but the days off is where we lose folks.
I heard that you lost quite a couple of people based on whatever, and you said it's basically of a family. What impediment would you be confronting when you're addressing workplace toxicity?
What impediment would I be facing? I don't believe we face anything impeding it. The supervisors start a conversation with individuals. They try to address it on their level. They counsel the individuals, and then they forward it to the deputy and myself if it needs further action. But there would be nothing, I believe, impeding us.
Feel that the environment is less toxic, is what you're saying? Is your environment, because you have such an important department that deals with so many different important issues of calls when people are calling in. And by no means in a department like that, you should have any type of discord going on as a family, because it can be a life-threatening call that comes in. Would you say everyone in the department feels safe, or do they feel that there's things going on in the department shouldn't be going on in the department? And if so, how can you make the department better?
If anyone's feeling safe, it would be my hopes that they bring it to the supervisor's attention. If they don't feel safe talking to the supervisor, that they would bring it to our attention, because everyone has the right to feel safe, and then they should feel safe. Sometimes in the department, I'm trying to kind of grasp what you're getting at, but sometimes in the department, maybe in emergency situations, people may be short with one another. They may not sound as ask questions in maybe the most appropriate manner, and it's more so the stress of the moment than it is how they feel about an individual. There's classes that help us with that. There's meaning training. And again, we try to keep the doors open for people to be able to come and share their experiences. And if their experiences require us bringing something to labor relations or an investigation, we do so. And that is documented.
My last question for you, Mr. Pete, because it seems like I've been hitting you hard. Describe your management style. Are you hands-on, visual, observant every day or day? Or do you manage from afar?
So my management style is always been hands-on and visual. It's actually, when I was promoted to the director's position, it's hard for me to let go and let others take the reins, so to speak, to designate tasks. I think I have a very good staff that helps, and I have a good staff that keeps me in check. But I would say, yeah, I'm a visual and a hands-on person, and trying, as I look towards retirement, trying to teach others to take my place.
I may, Sir Chair, ask this last and final question, sir. My
Yes.
last and final question to you, Mr. Pete. What challenges do you see ahead, and how do you plan to address them?
So I think one of the largest challenges we have ahead operationally is we're getting ready to replace the city's entire radio system, public safety radio system. That's going to be a huge challenge. There's the fiscal side of it. There's the physical side of it, planning and implementing, and the organization, organizing it. That's a huge challenge. It's a huge challenge because we've had a turnover through people leaving, through the department experienced death this year. The department experienced promotion, retirement. So we've had a large turnover. So there's going to be a large challenge with training the new people and getting them up to speed and getting them up to the position to be able to do all the positions in the room. We are getting ready to try a new way in which we train dispatchers. In the past, we've trained dispatchers one step at a time. You came in, you learned how to be a call taker, then you went to become a fire dispatcher, and then you went to be a police dispatcher. That takes way too long. When I was in this position, I desperately wanted to try a new way, and we just started to get to a point where we could do that, and COVID hit us. And that what I wanted to try was, you train on fire radio for 2 weeks, then you go to police radio for 2 weeks, and you go back and forth for a set time, and that set time sets within your probationary period as a new employee. That tells us whether a person has what it takes to be an employee of New Haven Public Safety Communications, if they have the ability to handle that chaos, and also to be able to grasp and understand what's going to be expected of them on both radios, and just really just to understand what they're doing and be able to get it. But when they're done, after that period, when they are done, I now have a cross-trained employee, which has been a huge challenge for the department since the day I went to work there. Getting people from call taker all the way up to police dispatcher, and I say all the way to police dispatcher because police dispatcher is the top of the heap. That's the most challenging, it's the most intensive, busiest. Getting someone through all those paces is extremely challenging, extremely hard. It takes a very long time, because, for example, training on the fire radio, there's only one radio channel to train on. You can only train one person per shift, and we don't train on a midnight shift because midnight shift is too quiet. People don't learn anywhere as near as quickly as they need to, and it would take even double to 3 times as long. So in that example, you're only training 2 people, and it takes them 4+ months to learn how to use that radio. But if you think about it, if you think about my example there, you can see how long it takes. And then, so we needed to come up with a quicker way to do this. And I think that's going to be one of our largest challenges. The radio replacement for the city, training the new people, and seeing and fostering the department in post-COVID.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no more questions at this time. No more questions.
Thank you, Alder Smith. I've got a bunch. I'm getting questions from the unions. I'm getting questions from police, from the community. I'm trying to sort through them. And I'm going to be fair like we do with everyone else and give my 3. All right, there's reports of supervisors sleeping on duty. And this is a complaint that comes through from staff that's up in that room. And of course, they can't complain to the supervisor because they're the ones sleeping. I'm hoping that you're dealing with those, and we can talk about more of that offline. It's a personnel thing. But how many complaints do you get about performance, and say per month?
I would say we probably, from the supervisors about subordinates, or where complaints coming from where?
From the public. Let's start with the public, because we get a lot of them, and I'm hoping they are doing what we tell them and call you.
Okay, so they're not, because I just looked today and we had a total of 4 complaints through from the alders in the past. I think it was about 10 months, and each one of those, it is addressed thoroughly. More so, the complaints come from supervisors about their team, and those issues again are addressed through the CTOs and through remedial training and documented.
supervisors are complaining about their teams. Sounds kind of counterproductive. The supervisor should be the one resolving those issues with their teams.
Right, they begin the conversation with them and they refer them to a CTO to be remedially trained.
All right,
But
so
I don't
the-
see it as counterproductive. I see it as being productive. They counsel their team member and then forward it to the CTO so everyone has the same training in the same form and fashion. And to begin the document process for discipline if needed.
All right, so at this point, there's no real oversight of that division. Like the police department, the fire department have the police commission and fire commissions as an oversight to work along with the director. So you don't have that.
Correct.
So what do you do beyond?
I'm not sure if I understand your question. What do we do beyond?
Well, when there's disciplinary issues, what is your authority and what do you do as far as any suspensions or disciplinary?
Right. So our discipline is forwarded to HR for them to investigate and bring back for discipline. And that discipline starts at my office. I should say not starts, but it ends at my office.
Okay. All right. I just want to touch on a few because there's so many and we certainly don't want to go all night. But some police officers were polled and one of the questions that they were asked is, what's the most stressful thing in your day on the street? And many of them said the dispatchers. Dispatchers are the biggest problem that offer the most stress to them. And I'll try and give you a couple of quick examples of dispatchers who actually start yelling and panicking on excited incidents and actually get the police more upset and not giving out the information properly. Dispatchers that are not giving out additional information. When additional information comes to them, instead of them giving it to the officer when he's on his way to the call, they type it into the system. The officer can't sit there and read it while they're trying to go to an important job.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things of that nature, and there's more of them, and we can get when my turn comes around again. But how does the supervisor, how do you deal with those type of things? I don't know if that information is coming to you, that the officers are more stressed because of the way the dispatchers are acting on the air, and it's heard. I mean, it's public radio.
Right. So if that is, if it does come to me, it is dealt with through remedial training, through disciplinary action, and I would expect it would come to me. I have not heard some of it. I'll let Jeff speak to some of it as well. None of it would be tolerated. If there's a complaint, I would hope and expect that we have an open dialogue through the police rank, through Car 9 to me, through Chief of Operations. It was Chief Dominguez to me, and each time we have a complaint, it begins with the deputy, investigates it thoroughly, and gets to the bottom of what the situation was. One that you just said is concerning, that a dispatcher was yelling over the radio. I definitely would like to know that complaint, because that would be dealt with extremely quickly, and that sounds incorrect to me.
Well, the term in the conversation was yelling, but what happens is that there's a debate going on. They said yelling, but there's a debate going on between the dispatcher and the officer who's being sent on a job, and it just adds more stress to it. If
I agree.
officers say, well, they just give out the job, give us the information, and we'll go and handle it, but we don't need to debate about it or argue about who's in charge and who's in control over the air. Again,
pre-COVID, we were sending the supervisor down to lineup to take any kind of complaints that officers were having, and we haven't done of such. And I'd be very anxious to get back starting that practice again. because the idea that complaints wouldn't be dealt with or weren't seen, if it makes it to Jeff's or my office, is absolutely dealt with. Absolutely. But to sit here and listen to complaints that were never given to us, I think is unfair.
Well, I don't know if they weren't given to you. That's why I'm asking you.
Well, that's
Why I'm mentioning them.
yeah.
This is the opportunity. Own up.
I can document. I can show documentation of any complaints that have been given to us through the rank and file. Both in the majority, it would be police or through the community. Here's an example from one of the alders. Alder Roth had an issue. I believe we took care of her issue very quickly and very thoroughly. If given the opportunity to address complaints, this board has my word. They will be addressed thoroughly and expeditiously. We've made this very clear to the police department, not harbor complaints. Please let us know as soon as they happen. The supervisors, our supervisors are told the same thing, to document any issues that they find with a dispatcher or on the radio, so they can be dealt with.
Okay, I'll tell you one offline, but one supervisor this past Friday that was asleep from, well, we'll say for 4 hours on a shift. I won't take any more time. I think I did my 3 questions, and I'll talk about how much I hate the phone system later on. Alder Wingate, you are up next.
All set, sir.
All set. Alder Roth, you had a couple more questions?
No, I think I'm set. I just want to add that I just want to confirm. I did have a complaint, and I was very impressed with how quickly it was and thoroughly it was responded to. That had come through a constituent. So I was very appreciative of that. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Alder Crespo, did I skip over you, sir?
It's all right. It's right, Mr. Chair. I know it's a rather long meeting. I just wanted to ask a specific question. What can we as the Board of Alders do to help you, George, and help your department with regards to anything?
No, I had been thinking about that, and we had talked earlier about losing folks to other municipalities. I know there's something up there that with the police department where there's a signed contract that you have to stay working for New Haven Police Department, I believe, or something like that for X amount of time. If it would be wonderful if we could get something like that. If the Board of Alders in New Haven could reach out and come up with agreement with other surrounding Connecticut municipalities to put it in layman's terms, stop stealing our employees.
Stop stealing our police officers too. So
yeah, that's exactly. It's a lot of the issues we're talking about tonight, including complaints, they come from inexperience. They come from stressful situations. We've been through an extremely stressful situation with COVID. I'm not making excuses for the department, but we've had COVID run through the department. We've had deaths, a supervisor on the job, another well-liked coworker. The department here has been through an awful lot. Retaining people is probably our number one issue. And Alder Smith was asking questions in regards to problem people in the department and so forth. And it seems like we lose the good ones, and for some reason the not so great ones stay around. And we have some troublemakers in the department that we're trying to deal with. So that's what I would say to do. If you can do something similar to the police department has with healing our folks, that would be tremendous.
Thank you, Mrs. Vice Chair. Write that down. That's something you're going to be working on. I just wanted to also ask, what incentives are your employees provided with in order to maybe retain them? Such as, for example, there's many organizations that have loan forgiveness. Let's say you have a loan, and or maybe what is it, tuition reimbursement. So for folks that are looking to not go to college because they can afford it, and they look at this as a means to as a source of income, but then you can also offer, hey, not only would you get you would work here with a certification, but maybe you'll get a couple courses under your belt and be able to continue to advance within your customer service skills, telecommunication, what have you. Any incentives to the employees?
Oh, I can answer those because those are citywide. Many of our union contracts do have educational incentives for those who continue their studies. They get tuition reimbursement up to a certain level each year. In addition, for those who have student loans, work with a municipality is one of the qualifying jobs, which would get student loan forgiveness after a certain period of time. And our PSAP dispatchers do not exceed the income thresholds where you would then be disqualified. So you have to work for a municipality or a qualified nonprofit and can't make too much. And then through LCI and various housing programs, city employees do qualify for some of the home buyer incentives that are offered within the state.
Thank you, Deputy Bombero. My follow-up question to that is, I understand what the city employees can get. These specific employees at PSAP, can they get into that, as city employees, do they benefit from that? And are they being made aware that they have those incentives, that they have, hey, if you come work with me, you'll have these particular incentives that you can actually take advantage of? And does that happen, just like there's a seniority level that you can choose your shift, if you will, does it apply immediately after the probationary period has concluded? And of course, how long is that probationary period? Does it then expire after 90 days, 60, 6 months? Is it a year? Is it 2 years, 3 years, like officers? And then does that kick in automatically after that probationary period is over? And are the supervisors, hey, advocating, hey guys, take advantage of these courses, take advantage of these incentives, take advantage of first-time home buying, just as a way to promote within that those are the incentives within the department?
I think that's a great suggestion. And, as George mentioned, he has the employee newsletter. And so we could probably integrate some of the various programs into that newsletter so people are more aware of them. As per union contract, the dispatchers don't have a unique contract, similar to how police has a unique contract and fire has a unique contract. So the dispatchers are in the 884 bargaining unit, and the supervisors are in the 3144 bargaining unit. So their benefits, so to speak, and probationary periods are similar to those colleagues in those units.
One thing I'd like to add to that too is the state of Connecticut through the 901 fund offers training money, and through that weekly update, we will be, once we get our new training money, we will be putting out there specific dispatch courses that are made available to everyone. Again, like Alder Smith had mentioned, being fair to everyone. It's made it across the board. Whoever would like to take advantage of going to courses that would be paid for out of the city's allotted 911 training money, all they have to do is contact me and they're able to do so. The thing about that is they're just courses, and they're just courses related to dispatch. However, sometimes they do get into some computer learning and so forth. But outside of that, and what Becky has said, there's not much. No.
Thank you, Becky, and thank you, George. One additional question: does your department provide cultural sensitivity training to your staff before they get hired, or during their hiring process? Is it part of the onboarding to ensure that they're familiar with? Of course, you come into New Haven, we have everything. You know, we have Cape Verdean, you have Puerto Rican, you have Mexican, you have Anglo, African American, you have all sorts, you have Chinese, you name it. I mean, come to Fairhaven alone, walk up and down Grand Avenue, you're going to encounter at least 20 different nationalities. Do we have those trainings provided to the employees as an opportunity to also increase their level of customer service? I know that you're, given the pandemic earlier in your discussion, you were able to explain that those particular trainings were slowed down a little bit, and now you're trying to implement customer service. Is that also included as a part of your onboarding?
Yes, it actually is. Like we talked about, all their interns that said in service. So one of our in services we're going to add, we started with customer service, and our plans are to do a cultural awareness sensitivity training as well. For that exact reason, we deal with so many different cultures over the telephone, but we also deal with different cultures in a small working group as well. So that is part of our plan for this coming year. Yes.
Good. And I also know, I have one more question, Mr. Chair, before I yield back to you. I just wanted to ask, I know that you also mentioned that you are constantly certifying, constantly training, constantly providing those services. Do you also consider training such as workforce harassment, sexual harassment, corporate compliance, fire safety, emergency preparedness? Are those particular trainings provided? Because you are a very crucial component of this city. If something happens, you are the person that they're going to call, because you're the person who's going to dispatch the appropriate agency. So I wanted to know, internally, are we also training our staff within those capacities so they can also be prepared, not only at their workforce, but also have that experience here with their families?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, you'd be like hands-on fire safety.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry not to be clear. Not necessarily hands-on. More like, let's say you have, I don't know, an organization that gives you a video, and you look at a video for maybe 10-15 minutes, and then at the end you take like a 8 to 10 questionnaire quiz, such as what are the, I don't know, elements of fire and how to prevent fires or stuff like that. Almost like a health stream type of training that is provided on an annual basis, just to refreshing people's memory on what to do in this type of incident.
Yes, absolutely. That's all part of their Power Phone training. Again, Power Phone is one that provides our EMD, and EMD also covers fire, law, and that is all part of their every 2 year certification. Yes.
Great. Thank you, George. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Quick question for you, George. I know like the police and fire, they have their general orders and they're posted online. Are your SOPs online so that the public can see what your personnel are supposed to be doing?
No, they are not.
Is there a move to get them online, or do we need Becky to push that forward?
I think we could. I think that's a fantastic idea. It's one that has not been brought up or thought of. So thank you for that. And yeah, I would love to have that. We actually are in the midst of trying to put a team together to overhaul our SOPs, because some things have changed that we need to update. And once that is done, I think that would be a great final place for it, to have it published. Absolutely.
All right, for my last one, because there's a lot more, but there's going to be a public hearing coming up later on. There's been a request for a public hearing regarding that operation. My last one is, whenever I get a complaint from the community about a phone call they've made to communications, I ask them, well, who did you talk to? They say, I don't know. And whenever I call up there, the person doesn't identify themselves by either name or by number. And when I ask them, they kind of are like a deer in the headlights. Are they still told that they're supposed to identify themselves when they take a call?
Yes. They are all told to identify themselves by their operator number. The scripted answer, if you're calling 911, they do not. do it. They just ask 911 New Haven, what's the location of your emergency? And then they get right to the point of it. But for people that call on the non-emergency lines, the recommended greeting is New Haven Police, DA or operator, and then their number, which should start with the number 6. And then that's the identification. They are told that they do not have to provide their actual name to the caller, but it is available to the caller through the proper channels. I'm not going to say it's necessarily FOI, but there is a process by which, but the call taker themselves have been told by the administration that they do not have to provide their name, but when it's required that that name be revealed, we do reveal. But they are supposed to identify themselves by operator number.
All right, you said the key word though, you said recommended. Is it recommended or required?
I will clarify that and let them know that it is a requirement. In case there is confusion, it will be restated, it will be redistributed, and we'll make sure that it's taken care of.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from my colleagues? Alder Smith.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I hear that a lot of people are leaving for other positions elsewhere. There must be some great training that's going on there. I would think if we were to do more hiring for residents in New Haven, they will be more vested into the department because they live here, they pay taxes here. That means they're going to shop here, and they'll be, they know the streets, and they will care a lot about what happens in the department and not leave after they get the training, because we're spending a lot of money just to train people. I'm just very inquisitive. How many people left, and where were they from surrounding towns?
Off the top of my head, I don't know how many people have left of recent. And did they go to surrounding? And sorry, what was your second part of the question? Did they go to surrounding towns? We have a retirement coming up. We had a surrounding town. I believe it's Greenwich.
Not a surrounding town.
Yeah, it's not a surrounding town, but it's out of us.
The individual that went to Greenwich was a Trumbull resident.
Yeah.
Ended up going to Greenwich for a significantly higher salary.
So they got the training from New Haven, and I mean, New Haven gives excellent training from police, fire, 911 operators. So we're training people from the suburbs here in New Haven so that they can go to other towns to get higher positions. So like I said, my recommendation is that you start training people that live in New Haven, hiring and live in New Haven so that they can be vested into the department.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more.
I believe the civil service rules give some preferential points for New Haven residency to those candidates that apply. But I'm not certain what other incentive there may or may not be based on union contracts and other civil service rules and regulations that are in place, other than giving preference points to residents, and I believe veterans get preference points.
I'm very aware of the civil service rules and the preference points that are given. And I'm also aware that there has been people from New Haven that have applied for the position and ranked in a certain ranking within 3 of the department, but yet they were skipped over. So I'm just asking you to just be more stringent of how you screen people and coming into that's taking these tests, that they're not bypassed. New Haven folks are not bypassed for suburb people. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Well, let me just add one piece then. Jeff or Pete or Becky, do you know of the 50 plus employees there, how many are New Haven residents?
49%.
Number. I don't want a percentage. the game. That's a game.
27.
Okay. All right. Any other questions from my colleagues? I'm looking around. I see no other questions.
To add to that, Alder, also we currently have 5 vacancies. So
Chances of filling them anytime soon?
we're in the process now, yes. But
Good.
it's a good conversation tonight.
Alder Crespo.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. George, you just reminded me of the question. I was going to ask, do you have any current vacancies? For the simple reason that I checked the New Haven website about an hour ago and did not see anything for the PSAP positions.
So there's
a current list. We're hiring off of a current civil service list, which we're towards the end of. So like I had stated earlier, we're going to be I'll be asking for another exam because I like to have a list. Historically, the department has always been lapsed in hiring, and once that happens, you get behind the 8 ball. It takes forever, and the snowball effect happens, and there's more and more and more openings. This is nothing new to this, not specifically this department. It stemmed before the 2 dispatch operations were merged. When I started, I was just a fire dispatcher, and then the police department had their own communications division. And historically, let's call them divisions. The divisions struggled with filling vacancies all the time. So it's pretty much my mission to not allow that to happen. So we'll be calling for another exam. And we have some great ideas from this evening for recruitment and hiring, pushing more to hire from within New Haven. So we're going to have a great opportunity.
And high school grads.
Oh yeah, yes, exactly, absolutely.
And just out of curiosity, Mr. Chair, this is going to be my last question for the evening, since I know that there's going to be a public safety meeting later on, a public hearing rather. Out of curiosity, because Mr. Chair, just opened up my mind a little bit because we wanted to get a number of how many folks are within New Haven, which is 27. What's the ratio of men versus women? How many females are working as dispatchers versus males, or vice versa?
I don't have a specific number. I could probably count it off given the opportunity, but it is significantly skewed towards females.
Okay.
There are far more females than there are males. And if I may just address quickly one important matter for many members of the committee, the next hiring list will be for a bilingual dispatcher operator. The agreement that was in place through HR, labor, and the department was to alternate between a traditional call taker operator and then a bilingual. And since we did a non-bilingual the last time, this time it's going to be a bilingual one, which will help us to eventually fill some of those vacancies on some of the less desired shifts or the people with lower seniority, so they're just stuck on the other days.
Phenomenal. Mr. Chair, just want to say thank you to George, thank you, Jeff, for the information provided, and thank you, Deputy Bombero, for also providing insight. And Mr. Chair, I yield back to you. I'm all set.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to also thank everyone. We're a little bit hard on you, a bit, but it could be worse. Yeah. But we try to make it easier, and we can all walk out with a smile and maybe a head full of more information. Mr. Vice Chair, did you have a comment?
I really want us to, thank you, Chair. I really want us to follow up on the things that we talked about tonight. It's a lot of information that went out in the last couple of hours, and it seems like there are some loose pieces. There are some intangibles that we can fix. There are some things that we can work on together to try to make this the elite of the elite department. And I think the only way we can do it if we can communicate, Rebecca, if we can, get together and look at some paperwork on some ideas putting some best practice thoughts in this, because I hear, if I'm not mistaken, I don't want to end the meeting like this, but I hear there's some barriers that don't have to be, right? I think we can do some best practice stuff to figure things out, where we can get a robust way of doing things in the PSAP. So I think, I know we're gonna have a public hearing on it, but sometimes when you have so many parts and pieces, because it sounds like it's a hectic environment at times.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you know, I think that sometimes you need to have a smaller group to try to figure out some of these issues and problems, or opportunities, I should say, so we can fix those things, right? What is the best interest of the actual operation? So I don't want to belabor the time, but once again, I apologize for being late, Chair, in committee, but this is an important topic, and the 5 positions that's open, we should take a look at and start from there. Maybe we need to start from there on how we change the environment and the dynamic on how we move.
True. And I think we have to look at retention and not continue to lose those people to other towns.
Yeah.
And we have that reputation, as it was mentioned earlier, that our police, our fire, and our emergency communications get some of the best training and best exposure. That's the biggest thing. The exposure that you get working those kind of jobs in this city is in demand in the small towns. And especially when they don't have to pay for it.
That's right.
No,
Exactly. If I can, I'm sorry, if I can reiterate, please, if there are complaints, please bring them to my attention or Jeff's attention.
Yeah, and I still have the floor, Chair, or no?
Yes, you may have the floor again. You
Thank you,
forfeited, but you did yield it, but I'll give it back.
I appreciate you. Listen, teamwork make a dream work. I don't care what nobody say. Right. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so before George retired, because he said it 4 times on this Zoom since I've been here. Before George retired, we're going to implement some of this stuff so his legacy can live on in a positive light. So we're going to hold George to help us make some changes, some impactful changes. I don't know Jeff, but I know George. So we're gonna work on these issues together so we can, have your legacy straight.
So George can't leave until we finish with him, right?
That's what we say.
That's fine, because that is part of what I want to do. I want to leave the department in a good place. That's my it's been my whole life.
We get it.
Ollie Crespo, did you have your hand up? All right, I'm sorry. Are you through, Mr. Vice Chair?
Yes, Chair, I am.
May I address the Vice Chair for 1 second, please?
Sure.
I have seen Mr. Pete's available time off vacation. So, Mr. Vice Chair, I expect that you and I will get to know each other very well in the coming months. And I look forward to the opportunity to work with you.
Likewise.
All right.
I yield.
Ollie Crespo,
Mr.
last
Chair,
word.
yes, through you, Mr. Chair. If we can just get the contact info of Jeff and George, just so that we can, reach out to them once we have a concern within our constituents, if there's any complaints or if there's any way to collaborate, just so that we can, send it. Hey, here's a quick tip. Here's what the word in the street is. As the alders that we are, we have our ears that are very sensitive to the community because we're always with them. And by being able to have that contact info, we can just send a quick correspondence. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, I'll ask our staff to email the alders out that information. How's that? Good?
And if I could add one more thing, Mr. Chair, please, as we begin to move towards meetings, the neighborhood management meetings, to include us, to include our public education and awareness team. I think that's going to be a great step.
Well, we can get you the name. I don't know if Becky may have the names and contact for all the management teams, and you could just send a note out that you're available.
Fantastic. Thank you.
And I think Alder Roth, did you have something, or you wanted to wait until we concluded the meeting? Okay. All right. The floor is open, Mr. Vice Chair.
I have no more. Thank you.
We have a motion.
Abby wanted to speak.
Alder Roth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank our Becky and George Pete and Jeff Patton very much for coming tonight. I also want to thank Mickey Mercer, who's retiring soon, for serving, helping us on our committee so well. And so I just want to be sure that we said that as well. We'll be very missed.
Absolutely, Mickey.
There he is. Won't see that happy face too much longer, huh? You have to
So
come
now,
back.
so now I do want to say something. I was about to end the meeting, but now I'm doing.
I'll
Chair. No, I tell you, when I first got on the board, I got on a lot of committees and wanted to do a lot of things, right? And I sit in the room trying to learn how to do the CDBG. And me and Mickey will go every time. And, even after we got to know it and understood it, it was just good to sit with Mickey and go through the process. So I want to say thank you for your service of 25 years, man. Thank you for everything you've been doing. Thank you for the last 10 years with me, helping me. I think help the city a lot, help the city out just a little bit. So thank you, Mickey.
Mickey's been a great help, helping me out a lot with a lot of things on this committee. Moving it forward, keeping me up to date on what's sitting and what's holding and who's got to be contacted. So thank you very much, Mick. I'll miss you.
Thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
Motion for adjournment.
I make a motion we adjourn.
Second.
Moved in second. All in favor? Aye.
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 Are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for attending
you.
tonight.
Be safe, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Alder Hayward, just in time.